Welcome to another Build It Live trailer. I have a very special guest with me today, Travis Britton. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm good, Juan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing spectacular, man. I know that you just it's always interesting as we're on the road, right? We're always sliding into home base at the last second, and I know that today's no different for you. So appreciate you coming in. I know you're traveling. Where are you coming from?
So right now, I just landed in Nashville for a Robin Robbins show. So I'm just outside in Franklin, and I was just at Exchange Security in Virginia this morning.
Oh, nothing like back-to-back shows. I thought my schedule was crazy, but I'm appreciative of the fact that you're here. Travis, thank you for joining us. We have such a great show lined up for everyone that's joining in today. One of the more important things is, we have a great show coming up. Obviously, this is part of a series of Build It Live trailers for IT by Design's amazing conference, Build It Live 2022, coming in at you for July 27th through 29th, which, believe it or not, is only a couple weeks away. And Travis, you're joining us there, right?
I know I'm so excited, and I can't believe it's that far away. I see the little countdown on my app because I have them all set up for all these events. So after this back to back, I do have like 1 week basically back at home base, and then I'm so excited to be back down in Jersey City. It's uh that was actually my second show that I ever went to in the channel. As a vendor, so I have a special place. I've been to every Build It Live that there has been, so I'm
Oh,
really
that's
excited to be back for this show.
well, I'll tell you what, it's bigger and better this year. For those that are joining us today and that haven't registered yet, make sure you go out and register at Build It Live or buildit-live.net. And I always do that. Tiffany's going to get me for that. One of the great things about it is, I know she says it too. She's like, "Why do you do it every time?" I'm like, I know. So, with that being said, for those of you that aren't registered, we've got a couple weeks away. Make sure you're getting your registrations done. But one of the good things today is that we have a special code coming in from Blackpoint. Thank you so much for Blackpoint. For you guys, for those that are registering today, you guys are getting a discount on your tickets. For those that are registering today, your code is Risky Business. So, and that's really what our topic is going to be about. But with that being said, there is something I always love to do, Travis. It's I love to have a trivia question on our show. And for those of you that are in the chat today, and those of you that are going to be watching live after this, make sure that you do this and enter your information in today only. For those of you that answer the trivia question, you can be entered into winning a drawing for 2 tickets. And our trivia question today is what is our trivia question today, Travis?
Yes. So our trivia question today is, what is the keyboard shortcut for you to launch the Windows Task Manager?
Hmm.
So there's a keyboard shortcut that I had forgot. It's been a hot minute since I've been a Windows administrator. Uh, Being on the road and on this, I get the pleasure of working with the MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
The battery life is great. So I haven't had a chance to use that keyboard shortcut. So I had to go back into my old memory to remember what that is. But that's our trivia question for today is, what is the keyboard shortcut to open up the Windows Task Manager?
All right. For those of you that are joining on now, and for those of you that are joining through the remainder of the day, this is our trivia question. So for those of you that are joining us in and want to win a couple free tickets, we're giving away a couple free tickets. They'll be announced today. So make sure that you guys are joining on the chat. Well, and Travis, I want to introduce you because I don't know that very many people do, or those that are in the channel. Obviously, you're an icon in the channel, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. You've been around quite a bit of time, and we've circled the horses quite a few times at a number amount of events. But Travis, you're joining us today. Tell us a little bit about Blackpoint, your title there, what you're up to, and kind of what you're doing these days.
Yeah. So uh, really excited to be here. I'm now a part of the Blackpoint team. My previous experience at an MSP, before I moved over to IT Glue, where I was there for about just over 5 years. Rode that through to the acquisition of Kaseya, worked at Kaseya, and then left to come join Blackpoint here. What really got me interested was the idea that I wanted to give back. And one of the ways that, and one of the challenges that I saw in the space was this idea of, how do we manage risk and how do we secure our customers? So I really wanted to get involved in a company that was going to really help secure SMBs. And so Blackpoint has been doing that with their core product, which is MDR, or Managed Detection and Response. And what I like to say is that our MDR really focuses on the R, which is the response. So it's not managed detection and reporting, where we're just sending an alert over to you or an email telling you, hey, you've got something bad going on. And by the time you see it in your email inbox, it's been 20 minutes and now all hell is broken loose.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that that gets dealt with. So our MDR has that actual response with our US based SOC.
Nice. And your new title, what's your new title over there, Travis?
Yeah, so I'm the director of product marketing over here. So helping to craft that message, get you guys content so that you can help sell and talk to your customers about the risk that exists and why they may need cybersecurity, hopefully from us, but also why they need your managed services because of the risk that's involved and how we can protect them in this new age.
I love the empowerment component of that. It's one of the big things that we don't often, there's a lot of things that happen. I say this all the time as I'm working with MSPs or others. There's a thing called having a practice, being in practice, and having a best practice, right? And oftentimes, being in practice is one of the things that we often circle around as MSP business owners, or it's just it's a myriad of opportunities. And one of the things that I think that we don't recognize, and as I want to dive into this, because today's whole webinar is about how do we manage risk, and what is it, and do you even recognize the risk that you're bringing in? And I want to just be honest here, because I talk about this all the time, is the liability that you don't see, right? And it's whenever we sign a customer for service, we're inheriting a myriad of risk. And I'm interested to hear, obviously Blackpoint's all about helping us through that, and business owners alike and MSPs, bring that education. And Travis, I'm really excited to hear what your thoughts are on this. But as we talk about how to deal with it and really managing the business of risk, let's jump into some of the meat and potatoes. And what are some of the things that you see, Travis, on your radar whenever MSPs are signing up new customers? What are some of the inherent risks that they're immediately checking the box that maybe they don't see?
Yeah, and I think we all sort of have this concept or in the back of our mind that that transition time is a really risky time. We're installing our tools, we're spending time at there, and maybe they have already been impacted, or maybe there is a bad actor that's already sitting in the network, or there's a bad configuration that still exists. The part of the onboarding process for when you bring on a new customer is asset identification, which is kind of the first line. You need to know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
so if that process doesn't go well, you find devices after the fact that we're hiding under tables or in broom closets. Those represent a fairly big risk. And so skipping that and jumping ahead to maybe the fun stuff of installing a new backup appliance or deploying out a new thing, or doing that is the fun stuff that we like to do, not necessarily the crawling around in server room closets to try and make sure that we found everything. So I kind of like to think of the kind of the NIST framework, where it's like identify, detect, protect, like all of those key areas about where you need to always remember to start at the front of identifying things. So that's one area that I think we all kind of know it, but it's really hard to do. And
Yeah.
I know that everyone says, "Oh yeah, like you buy this tool and it will do a network scan and do all that." And like our tool has a built-in network detection and
Yeah.
live network mapping as well, but it's hard. So just don't forget about that part.
I would say, I think all of us, and I don't care, whether you started off in managed services or if you're a traditional break fix, I think the origin story of managed services was project work, right? So obviously, anytime, and I say this nowadays, I say, look, one of the most dangerous places you could be is touching an environment that you have no idea what is wrong with it, right? Because the second that you touch it, you're immediately responsible for it. Because you're a technology solution provider, you've inherited risk the second that you lay your hands on it. And I don't think that we often recognize that. I know I had a break fix company for many years, and one of the biggest challenges I saw was anytime I touched something, everything else immediately would break. And the next thing you know, I was, having to do some sort of, warranty repair work. Right. And it's
Yeah.
just that it's the inference that the customer believes that anytime you touch something, everything should work. So I don't think that a lot of MSPs recognize, and to your point, as you mentioned, many of them run into it thinking, oh, well, I'm going to go get all this project work and then I'll just maintain everything else. I don't really care if anything else is there, but all of those opportunities that may have been lying previously without identifying all of the opportunities before you walked into it could be a huge risk for your business, right? And I see that happen
Yeah.
often. We run to these tools that are like, ah, that's good enough. And then next thing you know, it's like, I got hit with malware and I'm not sure how. Well, it was kind of there before you started, right?
Yeah. And
So,
it's hard when you think this customer just wants, like you said, a project work, or I'm just going to do
yeah,
um, I'm thinking to, like, I'm a copier company. I just need access to some Ethernet so I can install a new copier or do a security camera system, right? So they're taking on a lot of that risk, and
oh yeah,
maybe because of their knowledge or their scope that they are not as aware to it. But that's what we think about even for us. And this is why, like, we have built in that in our tool. Like, when you come to us, is we're taking on risk as well, right? Our reputation is on the line to protect you, but if you um, if our solution or whoever's solution is not installed everywhere, we don't have that full visibility. It's not going to work. It's kind of like to your point, when you hire a plumber to come in and fix the toilet and the shower starts breaking. Um, were they responsible for that, or are they just because they're both a plumber? And that's a risk that happens, that we need to take advantage of and take stock of. So when
yeah,
you're doing that first scoping, looking at and laying out, like, these are the risks that I'm taking, but also what are the risks to the customer, um, for touching it, right? If we're going to continue with the plumbing analogy here, as soon as you start renovations, you find one problem after another once you start pulling back the drywall, right?
oh yeah. Hey, it's funny you mentioned that because my daughter is out on her own now. Kudos to her for being so strong and will to go do that. It's out, anytime you're out on the first time, it's always rough, right? But she's out and she has her own apartment. She's on a bottom floor. We always said, get a bottom floor. It's better to move in and out of, right? And one of the things, she came home one day and there's just all this sewage all over her kitchen floor. And she's like, what happened here? So they call a plumber, to your point. They come in and they snake the drain and they're like, all right, cool. Sorry, we don't know what happened. Seems kind of odd. Not quite sure. 2 weeks later, happens again. And she's like, what the heck is going on here? They clean it up, go away, happens again another 2 weeks later. And what it was the people upstairs were doing a bunch of stuff and clogging up the drains, but you didn't recognize that that was problem. That root cause analysis was never done, right? No one understood that this was a chain of irrational events that were taking place. And oftentimes like that, it's similar to what we deal with, right? We're always cleaning up a mess in some shape or form, and we have no idea how it keeps appearing. And we're like, what is going on here? But to your
Yeah.
point, that root cause analysis, and so I'm curious of what your thoughts are around this. You guys are running a great business, obviously have a great program. What are 4 ways that MSPs can deal with risk? What are some of the things that they can do, and some of the advice that you might have?
Yeah. So I think it comes back to that, a bit of that root cause analysis, and that big scoping conversation that you have when you take on. There's a tough conversation that happens, or that should happen more often, about sitting down and saying, these are all of the risks that you have based on your findings when you're looking at the environment. Do you want to avoid the risk? So that's the first one, avoid it at all. So if it's a piece of technology, it's not using that. Or maybe if they're so risky, you say, well, you can avoid this by not going on the internet. We can just completely unplug your modem and you can go back to paper. So that's one way, probably not the most recommended way to deal with it, but there's some business people who think that way, that say, I'll just avoid the risk. So that's
Yeah.
one. Second is to accept the risk, which is probably what a lot of business owners have been doing up to this point, and they're kind of realizing that they can't just accept it anymore.
Yeah.
They're realizing that being on the internet is kind of like living in a bit of a dangerous neighborhood.
Yeah.
Putting your storefront there, it's inherently this, so we can't just accept it anymore. Um, and that's sort of the challenge, and that's one of the other analogies that I use when I'm helping our customers sell, is talk about it in terms that they're used to. So if they're in a small town, think about, depending on where it is, maybe in the late '90s and the early 2000s, people were like, I'm going to get this alarm system put in
Yeah.
because crime is going up or whatever, right? This is a similar sense, but now it's happening on their digital assets as opposed to just their physical assets of their storefront in an area that was seeing increased crime, right? So that's the second way, is to accept it, which is not working anymore. So then we have two ways left that are likely what we in the industry spend all of our time focusing on. One is mitigating the risk, and
Mhm.
that's deploying new services or making changes, whether that be through people, process, or technology, and hopefully a combination of all three to go and mitigate that risk. So we can think of our traditional things that everyone goes towards, like installing a new firewall, changing the EDR out, putting in anti-phishing or spam filters and things like that.
Mhm.
But then don't forget about the process and the people part of it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
100%.
I think I think a little bit about just some of the times that I've made requests, and maybe because I have this kind of weird mind in this, but I think about when I call any business and I say I want to do something sensitive. So I have a professional organization I'm a part of, not associated with the IT industry, my personal life, and I call them and I say, hey, I want to update my credit card, or I want to do this, or I start kind of like almost phishing myself, like social
Yeah.
engineering myself to see what they do about whether they have the right people and the processes in place to say, hey, we need to verify who you are. So it's things like that that we need to also train them on. It's not always just about the technology, because the medium that it comes through might be technology, and therefore, to your point, they're going to come back and blame you when maybe they were exfiltrated data, but because they did it by email, it's now your fault, even though the person still attached the file and sent it.
Yeah, no, and it's happening from everywhere.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Before you spit out your last point there, I want to stop for just a second, just because it's coming in a very different way. And even ironically for me, being in this industry for almost 30 plus years now, seeing all the iterations, and understanding the way things have come, from the Arabian Prince, phishing email, all the way back from, hey, your account information was lost, or locked out, put your information in the old version. We see it nowadays is a much different one, but I love the Microsoft pages that look authentic, people putting their username and passwords, and they're like, I don't know what happened to me. But the one that I think is the most intricate, and I think the ones we got to be paying attention to here, are the ones where they're using multiple people in multiple ways to get your information. It happened to my wife the other day, and it was shocking that it arrived at my front door, because normally we're pretty cognizant. To your point, it came in where she was trying to sell something on Facebook Marketplace, and somebody was like, "Hey, do me a favor. I can't, I have a sad story. Obviously, da 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 da." Seemed pretty realistic, but then what they did was, "Hey, I'm trying to send you the money via Zelle. I'll have somebody come and pick it up a little bit later today because I'm an old age person. Let me get your Zelle information so I can send it to you. Right, your phone number, your email address." It says your phone number's not working. Let me get your email address. You know what? That's not working either. Can I get, other pieces of information? And I stopped her and I said, hey, don't give them that last piece of information. They're hacking you. I said, 5 seconds later, right now, you're going to get three other people that are going to ask you for some other meaningful piece of information. Sure enough, ping, 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 it came in. And it's just so interesting that now threats have changed so much from the place where we were to now it's a multiple attack at the same exact time in such a small way. And those risks is what we're having to deal with as business owners, is that we're having to now mitigate and educate end users far past where we were at, to like this new modern era that's really ramped up, where this is like an actual business and an enterprise that is making a lot of money for these attackers, right? So I just wanted to point that out, that it's not
Hmm.
as simple as it used to be, right? Where we could just put tools in place. Now there's so much more to it. So I'll let you get to your last point on your number 4, because I just wanted to inject that real quick because it really resonated with me.
Yeah, no, and it's such an interesting time, and it's I think we're all nerds at heart, and we all would love to just throw technology at it, right? Or maybe we want to go back to the old days where we got to just put on a pair of jeans and go with our polo shirt and go run some cables and then get the same amount of money that we're getting. But now we have
Oh,
these other aspects,
the
these
old
soft
easy
skills,
days,
right?
man. Yeah, the easy
Yeah, the
days.
easy, yeah. I yeah, I remember that, and that's how I got in the industry because I was like, oh, this looks so easy. I can do this, and now I'm here being like, oh man, look what we're at now.
You're like, I took the blue pill on accident.
Yeah, exactly. So the last way to mitigate risk is to transfer it. So ways you can think about that is one of them is outsourcing. So that's what they're doing some of it to you. They're by relaying the risk to you, and that's why they're coming and blaming you. But the other way that they can do that is through insurance. And that's actually what our breakout session is going to be on when we're at Build It in just a few days here. So Chris Wilkerson is our vice president of risk, which is our cyber insurance arm of
Mhm.
our business. So he's going to talk a little bit more about that and some of the implications of that. As I'm sure everyone is aware and is no stranger to the fact that cyber insurance and insurance in general for MSPs is becoming more and more challenging
Oh, yeah.
because of the risk that's happening. So all these things we're talking about is hitting the insurance companies because they're losing money. They're not making, and they're having to jack up premiums. And
Yeah.
some insurance carriers are actually no longer offering insurance to MSPs or even doing cyber insurance because it's too much of a risk to them, and they're losing out on it.
100%. I mean, every single time you hear a breach, I mean, that some insurance company is paying out something. And it's interesting that the insurance companies are not willing to insure MSPs if you're not implementing certain technologies now. Like we're hearing a lot of backlash in the industry in regards to that. And so many insurance carriers are just flat out saying we're no longer servicing this type of business anymore, right? And it's interesting because it's a flip side of the coin where you're getting so many customers that are saying I have to be able to pass this risk assessment to be able to get insured, period. Otherwise, I'm getting dropped, and it's infecting businesses in so many different ways. But the industry is recognizing there is a huge amount of risk here, and they're pushing back. So I like where you're going with that because whenever you're thinking about it, I started at the beginning with my MSP and said, look, it's in our contract. Like if you don't do these things, we can't support you. If you don't have cybersecurity liability insurance, we don't really necessarily want you as a customer, right? And the reason for that is because somebody has educated them on best practice. And we wanted to be able to service customers that wanted to be best practice companies, not the ones that are like inheriting the risk, like, it'll never happen to me. Let's just do it cheaper to see how far we can get, right?
Yeah, they transferred the risk to the MSP, or they just accepted it. They're like, oh, it won't happen. The statistics are that it's only whatever 2 in every 100 people are going to be businesses. So if I
Yeah.
don't have 100 customers or whatever the math is, right? There's ways to do it, but so I don't want it to be too doom and gloom on that point because I was actually just talking with our CEO, John. He just spent a couple days in London, UK, talking with some insurance carriers about this problem, and they spent the whole week just meeting with them, talking specifically about the MSP space. And I do see. I won't go into detail because it's all very insurance speak, and I'm not an insurance person, but there is some light at the end of the tunnel, or some positive glimmers of hope that these insurance carriers like, okay, we can take on this risk. We just need more data, right? If you think back to the other risks that insurance carriers take on, home insurance, car insurance, right? They can track that over time. They know how many fires happen in a particular area or how bad crime is, and those trends take a long time to affect the rate based on how far you are from a fire station or a fire hydrant, right? Whereas the IT space is evolving so quickly that their systems of tracking data and making premium choices and risk assessment is changing so rapidly that their old formulas aren't working in
Yeah.
this space where everything's happening so quickly. So they are looking to get data and look at this and work with vendors like us to realize, okay, what is the right combination of um, you know uh, people, process, technology that's going to limit their risk, and do we have the data to say, oh, if you have XYZ types of tools and these processes implemented and these people doing these roles, that you'll reduce your risk and then therefore would be able to get insurance. So there are a few glimmers of hope there.
I will say this, I mean, and just to totally blow things out of proportion again, as soon as they start to probably get some line of sight in regards to what this might meaningfully be, we hit a pandemic, and then our surface risk area just explodes because now everyone's working from home and everybody's
Yeah.
touching all this critical data from non-business command control devices that have zero security on them, and we're just throwing VPNs out there like crazy, right? So it's like it's definitely going to take us a little bit of time to get our hands around it. But I love the fact that, that you guys are working alongside with them to kind of come up with meaningful ways forward. That's huge. And I think we need it now more than ever because it's changed everything. And I want to talk a little bit about that. What are some of the things that we've already done? Like obviously we signed a new customer up, we brought them in, obviously the pandemic happened and we probably have a bunch of customers that did just exactly what I just said and they scattered home and brought in all these different things. You mentioned something called security time bombs, and I really like that word because I think that we were sitting on one. We just didn't even know that it was even possible. It's like, okay, well, we're going to command control this one container and containerize this situation. But then something that we never expected happened. And then all of a sudden now we're trying to figure it out. So talk me through what some of those opportunities are, some of those security time bombs that maybe we don't know about.
Yeah, so kind of like the time bomb, or maybe landmine is a good word. I know those are kind of,
Yeah.
military analogies and those sometimes don't go over well. But the idea is that we've previously either accepted or mitigated a risk and we haven't revisited it. So that's one of the concepts that I am encouraging everyone, especially everyone in the MSP community, is to go back and look at what risks you have previously dealt with and whether you decided you're going to avoid them, accept them, mitigate, or transfer them, and determine has that risk calculation changed.
Yeah.
Some of the ones that I think we should pay attention to are, and I'll go through a couple here. The one being the RMM. I think that one came very clear
Ooh,
to us, especially when everyone started working remote, is we have these tools that we probably bought. So let's go back. You probably bought your RMM 5, 7 years ago, and whether you consciously did it or subconsciously, you made a risk decision about this, and it said, okay, well, it has this feature, it has this feature, and I'm going to accept the risk of putting a tool that has, hidden access to run PowerShell because that helps me, that gives me value and helps me manage my customers. I'm going to accept that risk because it's not as high. I only have a few customers or whatever your risk calculation
right.
was. Now you've grown. Now you have customers who are, I don't know, maybe in the DoD space or whatever, right? And the risk and the landscape has changed. And now you need to go back and think, okay, previously I accepted the risk with the trade-off that I would be able to do X, Y, and Z. And that's not to say that's still not true, right? There's a lot of things that the RMM brings security-wise. You can do patching with it. You want to make a security update and say, hey, I want to block XYZ, or I want to do
Yeah,
this. You can roll
right.
that out across all your customers instantly. So there's a security positive there, but there's also a bit of a drawback to it as well. And we got to continue to balance those. And I want to make that point clear because I don't want it to come across that I'm bashing RMMs, or that this was anything was their fault, because it was just a choice that we had to make at the time.
Yeah, and I think that to your point, it's oftentimes that we haven't done a lot of due diligence. I talk about this a lot whenever I'm helping MSPs out. It's like, when was the last time you did vendor due diligence on the tool stack that you have? And if you haven't, why not? And whenever I was building my MSP, I was very diligent in regards to why I was doing it, what the security implications, how it was going to empower me to be successful, and what was in it for the customer. And one of those things was the security controls and components behind it. Like, if you couldn't pass a internal risk assessment and didn't have all the security controls, like, I wasn't going to be able to offer it to my customer base, right? So it was really important that I was able to take a quality program to my customer and be able to say, here it is, right? And oftentimes, you got to be serious about it. You got to be intentional about making that decision. I take it very, 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 very seriously whenever I do business with somebody. And I think as an MSP business owner, we have to recognize we're helping somebody run their business. And it's that responsibility is quite large. So you have to take the ownership of that and make sure that you're taking care of that customer. And to your point, having and looking at those tools is very essential. I like where you're going with that. I mean, obviously, we didn't see that coming, just like we didn't see a lot of these other things coming. So let's talk about it. How do we mitigate some of that, Travis? Obviously, cybersecurity insurance is a big one. And, as a business owner, I remember when I first got started, that wasn't something that I bought. I wasn't really providing managed services at the time, but I realized real quick that I need to have cyber liability insurance. And back there is errors and omissions, right? Because it covered me from everything I wasn't saying, right? But talk to me about this cyber insurance component. What are you guys doing here? How do you see that shaping up?
Yeah, I think that's challenging. Yeah, like it's there's so many different aspects to it and so many different angles you can take at it. So um, I won't dive too much into it because I don't want to give away everything that Chris is going to talk about in a session
Yeah,
at
no,
Build
yeah,
It.
definitely. We
Uh,
definitely want to see everyone come to the show because you're going to hear more about this. So we won't steal Chris's thunder, but just an overview.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things that's really is changing is we need to talk about the different ways that we're looking at those risks and what are we going to do in our managed service agreements. So you mentioned a little bit earlier about, hey, um, uh, we have in our contracts, in our MSAs, in our contracts here that say you must do XYZ. We won't have you as a customer. But there's also some about, okay, if you do take them on, is there a plan to go and bring them to a certain level to make them even less risky? And if you don't have that language in your managed service agreement, what does that mean for you? And what are some ways that you can sort of hedge the exposure to
Right.
the liability by implementing certain languages in there. So that's kind of the key point that Chris is going to talk about in the breakout session is how do we uh, make sure that we have some best practices in place for writing our agreements and having those conversations with our customers so that we can uh, hedge our liability as MSPs, but inevitably, it's also going to help the end customer as well to reduce their risk, as that's probably going to be what is going to come out of it, is to just reduce their risk in general.
I love that. One of the big things I talk and teach MSPs all the time, and even when I was building my own, is outcomes. And a secure business is a huge outcome, right? It allows me to sleep good at night. It allows the customer to sleep good at night. And ultimately it allows the employees to sleep good at night, right? Because they're the ones that are having the
Yeah.
services. So I like where you're going with that. I love the business outcomes component of how do you take where your customer's at today and transform them into somewhere that they need to be. And I think a lot of that comes through the education and also through the right amount of steering and strategy and tactics in regards to making them make a good decision, right? Because I say this
Yeah.
often, given a chance to make a purchase, and I do this all the time, we'll always make the cheapest one. Like, how much can I do for the littlest amount of money? And even though I know that that's the wrong thing to do, it's always like I'm always trying to figure out how to get it cheaper. And so is everyone else in business, right? So, and security has always been a cheaper choice. It's like, I don't need it. So we have always just avoided it until now. So I really appreciate you guys steering into that. And I'm really looking forward to having you guys here. I'll be in that session listening to what Chris has to say about that because I think it's really, really timely and I think it's very important. But let's we're about the halfway point, Travis. Let's dive back into our trivia question for those that may be with us and take a short pause. What's our trivia question for the day today, Travis?
Yeah. So we want to know, what is the keyboard shortcut to launch the Windows Task Manager? So there's a keyboard shortcut. I'll give you a hint. There's this many keys that you need to hit on your keyboard. So if you know what that is, let us know for a chance to win um, the two tickets to join us at Build It Live in Jersey City in just a few days here.
Yeah, definitely. And just so everyone knows, you have till about 5 o'clock today to put your guess in. So for those of you that are watching, because we get a lot of people on the back end, Travis, watching the show, and we definitely want to make sure that they have a chance to play. I know that obviously this time frame, especially right now, I don't know what's going on. Everyone's really busy right now, but it's important that everyone knows that we will be doing that at the end of the day today. So Let's do this real quick, Travis. Obviously you've talked a lot about some of the business of risk, some of the key techniques and tactics that we can, kind of move our businesses forward, some of the strategies on how we can improve customer outcomes. What are you thinking, like, in terms of tools? Obviously, Blackpoint, or you guys have a lot of different kinds of tools. What are some of the tools that you guys have available for MSPs right now?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about our core product, which is our MDR at the top of the call here, and that's our flagship managed detection and response. So that's an agent that goes on your devices, your workstations, and your servers. And what that's doing is it's collecting telemetry and looking for signs of behavior tradecraft. And what tradecraft is things that end up slipping through your other defenses. So it's a layered approach, as some people like to say it, or onion approach, something like that. And the idea is that threat actors they know what stack you're using, and the technology, and they know how to overcome it. So they have some of the best tools, because they're the same tools that are off the shelf that anyone else can use. So
Mhm.
as a bad guy, why would I go write malware that is going to be detected by it's going to get in the definition database quite soon, and your every antivirus and EDR is going to pick it off, when I could just go buy a cheaper license to an RMM tool that you're using. So none of your other tools are going to say, hey, don't let this one run. I'm going to run Screen Connector. I'm going to run VSA, or pick whatever tool. I'm just not vendor naming. Just I can go get a tool for that for quite cheap. I can have, fish you into clicking it. And now I'm using a legitimate, signed, authentic tool to
Mhm.
exfiltrate your data, to share your screen, to use BitLocker built-in encryption to go and encrypt your files. Like there's no malware involved in that. But
Yeah.
that's a sign of tradecraft, and that's how they move through the network. And those are the types of attacks that we're seeing ransomware groups, and to some extent a little bit kind of higher up in the space, nation states using. So our tool is determined to look at that type of activity and hopefully catch it before it gets to that malware stage, and that's where your EDR and your antivirus comes in, and even hopefully not even get to this point, but if it does happen, get to your backup. So that's where we focus on that, and so that's kind of our core product. And what we do for the MSP community is we have our program that we call MS Protect, and that's where we give that technology at a discounted rate to protect your own house. So you can
Nice.
become a partner of ours, and that comes in at $5 an endpoint. So it's a easy way to get it onto your servers and workstations, and get to see how our 24/7 SOC actually starts working with environments, and taking a look at it. What's also really cool about this is that our latest product, which is called Cloud Response, is now included as a part of that NFR program. So Cloud Response works with Microsoft 365 to give both on-prem and SaaS visibility. We're seeing a ton of attacks and uptake in business email compromise, Azure AD attacks, SharePoint attacks. So this includes both of those, so that our SOC team is able to see both at the endpoint level as well at the cloud level, what's going on. So you get both of those included at just $5 an endpoint, to get your own team in order, and then adding on, you can, yeah, pick either of those products to sell to your customers, or you can sell both.
That's cool. I love that. And so, like, the NFR program obviously is part of it, and then the cloud program is included in it.
Yeah, exactly. So the two products, when you want to go sell it, you can either you start with the MDR, you can add on the cloud if they're using Microsoft 365, and you can bundle them together. But for you guys, we know that the vast majority of MSPs are Microsoft shops and are using Microsoft 365, so we include
Yeah.
that in there. So they're going to get email uh, monitoring as well. They're going to see when someone is logging in from an unauthorized country, or they're doing a illogical travel based on our rules, and then our team is actually able to uh, go in there and kill the session, so that if someone has signed in and they weren't supposed to, it's not just throwing an alert at you saying, "Hey, it looks like someone signed in." We're able to say, "Hey, oh, someone signed in. They set up a mail forwarding rule and they did this. Okay, we're going to go and smoke that access account, revoke the token, force password reset, and give you a call, so that you can work with the customer to get them back into their environment." And and if it get if because what could happen, and what we sometimes see is They get in there, they're going through the cloud, and we have desktop sync set up with our SharePoint or our OneDrive.
Right.
So they put a file on there, it gets synced down to the desktop, and now we're spreading out there. So with having both of those, we can see if there's work going in either direction, right? If they get on the endpoint, they're going to try and go to the cloud because that's where all the data is. If they get in the cloud, they're going to try to go to the endpoint and see what else they can get. So having that visibility with both of those products is really key.
That's, we've oftentimes, we talk a lot about living off of the land, and I remember, back in the old days, I can't even believe I say that out loud, but, we controlled the environment, and now with cloud, there's all these new autonomies, and all with the having the ability to bring your own device and sync to your personal devices and having your data in so many different places. Our attack surface has drastically increased. And I love the fact that you guys are watching all of those different endpoints, because those are places that's happened. I can't even tell you how many times. Like, so many people don't watch data traversing their network infrastructure, more or less data traversing their cloud infrastructures, and really looking at some of the payloads that are being delivered just without you even knowing. They don't even have to be there. They're just keep putting it down on everyone's machine.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not always, I think, from a technology perspective, and the nerdiness in all of us says that, we're trying to protect against exploits and 0 days. And while those are a threat, it's really just walking in the front door.
Yeah,
a lot of the time. And that's where that live off the land and that tradecraft is becoming so lucrative, is because I can sort of disguise myself as a normal IT admin. We talked about onboarding earlier, which is you're basically doing the same thing when you walk into a network. What are you doing? You're running an IP scan. You're trying to see if your creds work, the administrator creds they gave you. You're trying those against all the servers. You're basically doing exactly what the hacker's going to do, but when you come in, it's all right.
Yeah.
So, and none of their tools, like when you do that, your antivirus isn't going to stop you as a person from doing it, or whatever tool it is. And so keeping that in mind, that it's not always just about those fancy backdoor exploits and the 0 days. Those are still a risk, and those still exist, but the bad guys are realizing it's almost just as easy just to walk in the front door with stolen creds and start to run a total virus or total IP scanner, some of those tools that you guys are using today, because they know they'll go undetected.
Well, think about that for a minute. I mean, we're one firewall role and one credential away from doing every single thing that we do as managed services providers from the inside. That's it. There's two things. That's it. If I get those two things right, I got access just like you do on the other end of the stick, right? So, that's why a lot of people don't pay a lot. I remember back in the day when we used to watch firewall logs and we used to watch to see who's hitting. Those days are gone now. And it's no one pays attention to the firewall logs like they used to. Well, maybe not everybody. There might be some people that still do it. But that's how we lived. We watched to see who was trying to get in. We knew everything inside was fine because we controlled everything through permissions-based controls and principle of least privilege. But now everything's exploded, right? We're all over the place. You've got to monitor cloud locations. You got to monitor data workloads. You got to monitor all these different things. And so, to your point, and I think we can kind of circle back to the beginning where we talked about the amount of risk that we're inheriting as soon as we touch an environment. It's like, the second that you get access to somebody's Office 365 tenant, you have now checked the box that says, I'm fully responsible for anything that happens here. And if somebody's been compromised for the last 6 months and they're just sitting out there waiting for something to happen and they're delivering those payloads and they're, these corrupted files are being transferred out, there's your inherent risk. You just didn't know it. And that's where I think it's really important to hear what you're saying, because you guys are watching some of those blind sides.
Yeah, exactly. And to go back to one of the other sort of time bombs that I like to talk about is think about, and this wasn't just the pandemic that happened, but I think that really accelerated it. I try and get through as many webinars as I can without talking about the pandemic because I've been talking about it for so long.
I know. I hate to do it too.
Yeah. But what's interesting is that when we think about that risk assessment, I think back to probably some of the first times that I was selling or helping the MSPs to work at Sell Cloud Solutions or Sell Office or Exchange Online, it was called at the time, Office 365. And it was like, okay, well, we can, again, we made a subconscious risk assessment that this was less risky than replacing or keeping their Exchange server. They weren't willing to pay to move off of Windows 2008, sometimes even 2003, and we would move them there. And it was like, okay, the risk calculation was acceptable. But then we started rolling in all these new features. It wasn't just Exchange Online. Now we have Microsoft Teams. Now we said, oh, why don't we turn on Dynamic CRM? Why don't we turn on this or this? My package now includes XYZ. All these things got added on. And now that risk calculation we did to say, oh, my email that said, hey, honey, I'm on my way home.
Yeah.
That is now that data that's in Microsoft 365 that we accepted the risk of has drastically changed. It has so much more weight to it that we have to almost redo that risk calculation again. And I'm not sure that everyone has been thinking about that because, and it might be a bit of shadow IT where you deployed Microsoft licenses to a business and they said, oh, I need to start working from home. So I'll start using Teams and I'll start sending credit card numbers back and forth to people on Teams. And now you've put that information that in the system that wasn't originally scoped for that or wasn't a part of the initial risk assessment.
100%. And I do believe that, a lot of people just scrambled. And I think that everyone was trying to do everything they could to kind of keep, get customers in that right. And they keep their businesses running and making, and easy for people to do business. And that it propelled us into a new era for sure over the last, couple years. And from that, I think you're right. It's never a bad time to reassess everything. And I say this often, anytime that, once a year, re-onboard your customer, identify all the new risks, make sure that you're being well aware of what you're doing in regards to what you're liable for, the ways that you're presenting yourself and the way that your offering describes. I can't tell you how many times I see MSPs with like 20-page contracts saying all the things they're going to do. And I'm like, where's all the things you're not going to do? And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, that's exactly it. It's what you're not doing that they're going to nail you on if you ever end up have a situation, because you haven't spelled out what happens if there's something happens that I'm not taking care of. And cybersecurity is often one of the blind sides. So kudos to you guys for helping MSPs out there. I think it's really strong that you guys are doing that. One last check here as we're kind of coming in for a landing here. Travis, we got the famous trivia question for the Build It Live trailers. Obviously, everyone's going to join us at Build It Live 2022 coming up here in the next, I can't even believe it's almost 14 days away. I'll be in New York in less than 14 days, which is crazy to even think about that we're finally here. But what's our trivia question for those that are looking to win 2 tickets today?
Yes. So if you know the answer to this question, you'll want to let us know. It is, what is the keyboard shortcut to launch the Windows Task Manager? So we're going to raffle away like we were just talking about the 2 tickets to come see us and join us and everyone else at Build It Live. We have 2 sessions. So we talked a little bit about Chris Wilkerson in his session centered around cyber liability and insurance and what's going on with that. But our CEO, John Murchison, is also going to be there, and he has a main stage presentation. And he's going to go into a little bit more detail about what we're seeing in the threat landscape. It's going to be hitting on some of the points that I hit around here around risk and cloud and Microsoft 365, and what we're seeing at the endpoint. So you definitely don't want to miss those 2 sessions. And the only way to see that is to be with us live.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing that. I know you guys, that main stage presentation has piqued my interest for sure. I'll be sitting there in the crowd cheering you guys on. I know this is a huge area for MSP business owners that are really, maybe we just didn't stop to think about it, but we should. And I think that now we're becoming leaning more towards having to, push the needle toward that best practice opportunity with everything that's going on in the industry today. One of the other things too I want to bring up, Travis, is you guys are so good in the channel. You guys are doing all the right things. You got the amazing NFR program. You guys have a great community. You want to talk a little bit about the Blackpoint Command community a little bit?
Yes, and I do want to mention that just because we are. So I'll tell you what's going on. So our community is what we call Blackpoint Command, and so that has a couple of aspects to it. One, we do crowdcasts just like this, where we have different speakers come on and we talk everything about pricing and packaging, security, what we're seeing in the landscape. and really trying to build that community there. So we have a presentation with that. We also have a Slack group that we're starting up there. So there's some channels in there that you can connect with us and some of your other colleagues. So what's really cool is that just as we finish up here, our next command session, which is live, is starting in just a few minutes here. So if you have a few moments, you can actually jump on to our next command session, which is starting live on Crowdcast. And you can get to that at crowdcast.io/blackpointcommand. You can also find it on our website there. So you can get registered for that, get into the Slack as well, and see the content live as well.
Are you running that one, Travis?
I am not, but I'll be on the back end, backstage, helping out with that, making sure that everything is going around. So, yeah, we're getting kicked off right at the top of the hour there.
Well, I definitely want to make sure I give you a couple minutes because I know how it is coming in hot. So, definitely, any other last advice, Travis? Obviously, it's been amazing to have you with us. God, there's been so many amazing topics. I think that for those MSPs that haven't thought about it, they definitely should be thinking about the amount of risk that they're in here. And obviously, we are in the business of risk. What are your final thoughts, Travis? Any tips or advice, things that you want to share with the community?
What I would my biggest piece of advice right now is to think about whenever you see a problem or you see something come up, is picture, you might have seen this diagram where it's the guy trying to jump over the pit, and the pit can either be really shallow or it has the spikes in it, right? Is think about when you're in your mind, when you see a risk or you hear about something, a new 0-day or a new USB cable that's going to steal all your data, or all of these things that you kind of hear about, this sort of maybe fear, a little bit of fear and uncertainty and doubt. Is your mind going to that guy that's going to not make it when he jumps? He's going to fall on the spikes. Is that really the risk? Is that true, or is that just the feeling or the emotion that you're having? And go back and just kind of take a deep breath and say, okay, let me actually plot this out. I don't use that USB cable that is doing that, or whatever it is, right? So always, kind of take a step back and look at it from a little bit of a higher view and say, okay, what's my risk calculation here? Am I just trying to throw technology at it because I think the technology is cool, or am I trying to solve something that is not a really big risk, and spending money and wasting time on that when there's other things that I can do to protect myself that are probably more worth it, or would provide more return on investment from that investment and making that change, whether it be technology, people, or process.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it, man. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you, Travis. I look forward to having you join us. Build It Live 2022, July 27th through 29th. Looking forward to sharing some time with you, man, and definitely having such great sessions you guys are going to be bringing. I'm looking forward to all of it. For those of you that are joining us, we want to say thank you. Travis, it was a pleasure having you here today, brother. I definitely am looking forward to seeing you again. We'll have to get a picture of when we were out and Build It, and definitely do some social. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll announce the winners today. Make sure you answer that trivia question that Travis threw out there. You got till the end of the day today when we announce our winners. So thanks again for being here, Travis, and appreciate you joining us at Build It Live.
Yes, thanks, Juan. We'll see you guys all there in Jersey.
All right. See you soon.